Steve, you riding Friday?
Oh yeah.
Where are
You
y'all
drive.
having your lunch?
Well, my daughter's a returning maid, so I set up a special lunch just for like her and friends and family.
Oh,
But
nice.
it's Hermes now buys out Antoine's, but it was all sold out with the current court. So I haven't done a regular float lunch in a while. Um,
Hermes buys out Antoine's for everybody's float lunches or just for
for everything, they buy out the entire restaurant.
I did
And
not know that.
certain the last 3 years, certain floats have certain rooms, and
Right?
then the main room is reserved for the court. It's like last year I had a table of like 10 people or something,
Huh.
or more actually, like 14, I think, because I had my daughter, family, a bunch of her friends, a couple other people pop by. So um yeah, so they've been doing that. Larry DeMarce started doing that about 3 years ago.
Is he the captain?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Uh,
yeah.
the yeah, I remember there was a lot of people that were at Dickie Brennan's, but I don't know if there's still people that are doing
Oh,
Dickie's or not.
they're all over the place. I mean, there's probably about, I don't know, there's about 30 floats. So there's probably about 25 float luncheons.
Yeah, it's pretty
So
significant.
they do Tableau, they do Dickie Brennan's, I don't know if anyone does Galatoire's. There's a bunch of different ones.
I know there's a bunch of people who just they're people who do them.
Hey,
Yeah, and some of them
we're
always
gonna go
all aren't
ahead.
always based on the float. Like some of them, there's just someone on the
Gents, we
float.
gotta stop the conversation here.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, guys. It's 6:30. We're gonna go ahead and get started here.
Okay.
We we start all of our meetings with a prayer and a pledge, and then a little bit of business, and then we'll go ahead and get things started and rolling over to you. So we'll get started right now. I ask Rod Shurtleff to give us our opening prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be able to gather here today in the capacity to stand up for Idaho Town Hall. We're grateful for the country we live in, for our community, and for the freedoms we enjoy. We pray now that we'll be able to listen to these gentlemen as they teach us and about things that are important for us to understand and know. Pray that thy Spirit will help them to be able to articulate clearly the things that they want to convey to us. And we pray for thy blessings to be upon all of us and upon our families. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Rod. Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, real quick. Again, we're on Rumble. We are live streaming and we're recording this. And so if you know somebody that wasn't able to attend, you can go ahead and get on our Rumble channel, find the link and whatnot, and pass it on to them so they can go ahead and view it. Again, this year is the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, if you will. July 4th is the 250th anniversary signing the Declaration of Independence, and it's truly something to be grateful for. And I say this every week, is none of us would be sitting here today if it wasn't for what our founders did and the sacrifices they made 250 years ago. Okay, so we really need to appreciate them. We do have here, as Stand Up for Idaho, we're a nonprofit. All these things are free and whatnot, so we do need to raise a little bit of money. We are raffling off this this wooden carved flag, and we will draw the winner of that about the 4th of July. Okay, and so raffle tickets for $20 a piece. If you'd like to buy 1, 2, or 10,000, that would be fine with me. We can get you there back there. Okay, so we would really appreciate it. Couple of things real quick. Idaho right now is in a bit of a worrisome part in my view. The House last week actually passed a resolution, passed a bill, and it's HCR 25 on a balanced budget amendment, and it calls for an Article 5 convention. And what I've sent a lot of things out, an Article 5 convention is not what we need. Okay, so that bill actually went to the Senate and we'll hope it will be heard by the Senate sometime. Okay, potentially this week, could be tomorrow, who knows? You need to contact your senators and just tell them to vote no. If you do some research on an Article 5, you'll find out that it is not a good thing. And on that aspect, on February 25th, just 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a Representative Julianne Young. She's the former representative from Bingham County. She's going to come and talk to us about what an Article 5 convention really is. And we're doing she's actually come stand up for Idaho a couple of times to do this, but we're going to do it again so that we can get a better recording of it and everything so that people can share that. An Article 5 convention it is not the right thing to do. And I look at it like this. It's once you pull that trigger, you can't pull that bullet back. Okay, and that's the problem. So pay attention to those things. Like I say, call your senators, tell them no on that Article 5. Now, March 4th, and I usually don't go out this far, but this is important. Nick Edwards, he's actually the chief investigator for the Idaho Attorney General's office, and he's the commander of what's known as the Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force for the state of Idaho. He contacted me a couple of days ago and wanted to come to talk Stand Up for Idaho, and wants to tell there are things and educate us on what's going on. And again, it's for internet crimes against children. And he's going to talk about the internet safety and what is happening and what they're seeing in Idaho. So this is relevant. And so I encourage you, I put it out there, March 4th. Be here, bring your people. It is very important. They're actually coming from Boise specifically to talk to us and to do this thing. So it would be really good to do that. Next week, real quick, Idaho Falls and whatnot. A guy that's going to be here is Richard Williams. He's the director of engineering for what's known as Allo Corporation. A year or so ago, Allo and the city of Idaho Falls entered into a memorandum of understanding toward a partnering of where they're going to build some micro nuclear reactors here, just on the outskirts of Idaho Falls to help supply with the power. And so he's actually going to be here to talk more about it. Okay, so it's going to be really good to hear. But you didn't come tonight. We came to hear about something else: Sharia law, civilization, jihad, and just some things are going on. I'm not going to get into it. I'll let these guys do it, but I'm going to actually turn it over to the gentleman that actually introduced me to these guys and all that. And his name's Steve Hyatt, and he's been working this a bit, and he contacted me and thought this would be good to have these guys, and I agree. So, Steve, why don't you come on up here and whatnot? And I'll ask you this. Yeah, give Steve a big hand. When let's let these guys, do things. If you have some questions, and when they say, come up to the microphone here, and you please use the microphone. And if you look towards that monitor over there, then they can see you. Okay, so it's pretty good. But again, let's give them all a big hand, and we'll just have a good time. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you very much for having us here tonight. I think this is really important. Let me give you a little bit of background before I turn the floor over to the panel that we have to speak to us tonight. Back in 2010, I attended a little study group meeting, and the gentleman that was speaking that night basically asked the same question that Doug asked last week. What is Sharia and why is it important? And he went on to elaborate why he felt it was important. And when I came out of that meeting, I was pretty revved up. I was really concerned about what was going on here in Idaho, even back in 2010. And if you'll think back, that we were still, people still remembered what 9/11 was back then. And so we were still under the veil of 9/11. And there were some things going on even back then that were pretty frightening to me. So I got involved. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know anybody, didn't know anything. So I just kind of struck out on my own. I did contact one of my legislators back then, and I suggested to her that there were some problems. Probably the main issue that I came out of that meeting with, that I was most concerned with, was the encroachment of foreign law, Sharia law, into our court system here in Idaho. That one really kind of struck my interest. So anyway, I approached my legislator about it, and she didn't know anything about it. And she said, well, why don't you go do some research and get back with me? So I did. And I think that probably the most important thing I learned by doing that research is when you present something to a congressman, it needs to be one page. I walked in with like a 40-page PowerPoint, and I blew her away, and that was the end of it. But anyway, I learned a lot from that experience, and I'm probably the most important thing I learned was I found a group called the Center for Security Policy in about 2011. And within that group, I met a gentleman named Christopher Holton, who is on our panel tonight. Christopher has guided me. In fact, I kind of consider him a mentor to me. He has guided several of our legislators because over the years, starting in about 2012, we actually started to push some legislation here in Idaho. And that legislation never got passed in its entirety. But finally, in 2019, Barb Ehart was able to get some provisions of that original legislation passed, and it's now in part of Idaho code. So now 2019 was kind of a watershed year. What else happened in 2019? We had COVID starting up. We had the election fraud of the Biden administration. All kinds of things were going on. So at that point, I kind of dropped out of this exercise, this being concerned about what was going on. I mean, it was always in the back of my mind what's going on, but I just wasn't actively involved until about 3 weeks ago. And about 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call from some of the people I worked with over in Boise, and they said, hey, there's going to be a meeting in the State House. There are a couple of state reps that are going to put forth the American Law for American Courts legislation again in its entirety. And they're putting on a presentation in the Lincoln Auditorium in the State House, which we think you should be there. So I went over, I listened to a gentleman named Sharam Hadian talk about what is Sharia and why is it important. And I did have the opportunity to meet one of the sponsors of the bill. And since then, the bill has been introduced. I've got the bill number. I can share that with anybody that wants it later on. But that bill has, I think it was, 2 weeks ago, Doug, that bill was introduced. At any rate, on my way back from Boise, I got to thinking, well, if that bill's going to have any chance of success, we need to have legislators from Southeast Idaho vote for it. So I got to thinking, well, maybe I should contact Doug. And I did. And I kind of laid out the issues for Doug, and he became interested. And so here we are tonight. We're talking about what is Sharia and why is it important to Idaho. So with that, I'd like to introduce Christopher Holton. He is the Director of State Outreach for the Center of Security Policy and also a senior analyst. Stephen Gele is the General Counsel for the Center for Security Policy, and he's been heavily involved in drafting legislation for various states, and he's done work with our congressman here to craft legislation that actually fits into our code. And the third gentleman is Colonel Paul Deckert. He is a consultant to the Center for Security Policy in this area and also in military affairs. So with that, Christopher, Stephen, Colonel Deckert, thank you for taking your time. I know it was on short notice, but I appreciate it personally, and I'm sure this audience will learn a lot from your presentation. Thanks. The floor is yours.
Steve, thank you very much. You're an inspiration. You've been so persistent on this issue. Back in 2011, when we first met, I didn't realize how long it would take in some states to get this done. But when we were doing American laws for American courts around the country in 2010, 2010 through about 2014, it was a pretty big deal. And then interest just dried up. And I haven't been working on American laws for American courts much since about that time. Been working on other things involving the China threat, Antifa, things like that. And then over the last year and a half or so around the country, there's been a groundswell of concern about Sharia and what is known as Islamization, in which Muslims who do not have an interest in settling into a society and becoming part of a society are coming into the West and establishing enclaves and wanting to live by Sharia in Western Europe and here in the United States even. And that was what originally started us down this road back in 2009 at the Center for Security Policy, when we came up with American laws for American courts. Sharia is a form of law unlike any other law in the world. It covers everything. It covers this life and the hereafter. It covers personal aspects of life, including hygiene, and it covers the conditions under which an Islamic state would go to war and everything in between. So you can get a picture of how comprehensive Sharia is. I had a Sharia scholar say to me, a Sharia scholar who, by the way, was at Harvard Law School, which tells you something about Harvard. He told me that Sharia was the path on which we walk. And that pretty much describes what Sharia is. Sharia is everything to Islam. It is based on the Islamic trilogy, the Quran, the Hadith, which are traditions and sayings of the Prophet Muhammad and his life, and the Sirah, which is the biography of the Prophet Muhammad, which is about 800 pages, little bitty print. Most of Sharia comes from the Hadith and the Sirah. Those two combined are known as the Sunnah of Muhammad. Muhammad was regarded as the perfect example for everyone to follow. If Muhammad said to do it, you should do it. And if Muhammad did it, you should follow his example. And that laid the basis for Sharia, which really didn't get completed until about the 9th century, a couple centuries after Muhammad had died. Sharia is also unique in that it is the only form of religious law that applies to people of other faiths. Canon law applies to Catholics. Rabbinical law applies to Jews. Sharia applies to Muslims and non-Muslims, applies to everybody. In fact, 40% of Sharia has to do with relations with what is known as the kafir, which means unbeliever in Arabic. It's a derogatory term, really, for a non-believer in Arabic. Sharia is also the enemy threat doctrine. If you read the writings of Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, his successor, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the deceased head of the Islamic State, who had a PhD in Islamic law from Baghdad, a university in Baghdad. Hassan Nasrallah, who was the Secretary General of Hezbollah. The Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who founded the Islamic Revolution and took over Iran with the overthrow of the Shah. They all talk about the importance of Sharia. Every single jihadist organization in the world, every single one without exception. Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Hamas, Hezbollah, I could go on and on. Every single one has the goal of establishing an Islamic State ruled by Sharia. There's a big misconception that the jihadists want us to convert to Islam and that is their goal. That is actually not the case. They're happy for us to convert to Islam, but we will live under Sharia. That is their actual goal, is the imposition of Sharia. It is also the code by which they live. And Sharia has extensive sections dealing with violent jihad. And under Islamic law, under Sharia, and incidentally, Islamic law and Sharia are interchangeable terms. So if you hear the term Islamic law or you hear the term Sharia, it's the same thing. And if someone tries to tell you, and I've seen this happen, if someone tries to tell you that Islamic law and Sharia are two different things, they're concealing something, because that is absolutely not true. At any rate, Sharia is both the code by which the jihadist groups operate, and it's the goal that they have for establishing around the world. Because of that, it can be properly considered the enemy threat doctrine, and Sharia defines jihad as warfare to establish the religion against non-Muslims. That's the definition of jihad in Islamic law. Those people who say that jihad simply means to struggle, to strive, literally, that is a term, that is a meaning for the term, the word jihad. But in Islamic law, jihad means to war against non-Muslims to establish Allah's religion supreme over the entire earth. So that's why Sharia is a threat. And Sharia does manifest itself in non-Muslim countries, primarily through family law, but other ways as well. We wrote a book, 2014, I don't know if you can see it. It's called Sharia in American Courts, where we did a research study to find out if Sharia was showing up in U.S. court systems. And we found out that it was. We found some 500 cases in which Sharia came up. In most cases, it was not upheld. But we found 23 cases actually in which a judge either recognized or upheld partially or fully some aspect of Sharia in state courts in the United States, including child custody cases in which mothers in particular lost custody of their child because of foreign Sharia-based court orders that were recognized by bad judges here in the United States. So it is a multifaceted threat, and that's why we need to keep it from happening. Now, there is no silver bullet when it comes to Sharia. And really everyone is looking for a silver bullet. Everybody wants to pass a law that says no Sharia in whatever state. So no Sharia in Idaho. Sounds really good. Be simple, to the point. Let's just pass a law that says no Sharia. Well, they tried that in 2010 in Oklahoma with something called State Question 755. They passed a resolution through the legislature that said no Sharia in Oklahoma, and then it went on the ballot as a constitutional amendment in the next election cycle, and it passed overwhelmingly with 75% of the vote in Oklahoma. Unfortunately, as predicted by many legal scholars. It was struck down in federal court, and it was struck down by a Reagan-appointed judge. And then, and the reason it was struck down was because when you single out Sharia, it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and also violates the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. So that was struck down. At the same time, at the Center for Security Policy, we came up with something called American Laws for American Courts, and it was structured in a very different way. American Laws for American Courts simply says a court in this state shall not apply a foreign law or a foreign legal doctrine in a case if, in the process of applying that foreign law or foreign legal doctrine in the case at hand, any of the fundamental constitutional rights of any of the parties involved are violated. So we turn it around and we gear it towards protecting our fundamental constitutional rights. And the reason that works is because Sharia basically, on a fundamental level, violates so many of our fundamental constitutional rights. There's so many aspects of Sharia that do that. And so we've passed it in about a dozen states, and we hope to pass it in a few more this session, including in Idaho. Barbara Ehart was the one who originally started this effort in the legislature, golly, a long time ago. Now we've got a team of legislators, and we're told that the House Speaker is very much on board. So we're very optimistic that there's going to be a good outcome in the state of Idaho for American Laws for American Courts. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our General Counsel, Stephen Gele, for his comments on Sharia. Stephen, you there? Oh boy. All right, I guess I'll keep talking. At any rate, we passed that American Laws for American Courts in Tennessee first in 2010, and then Louisiana, and then Arizona, and then a flurry of states: Kansas, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, state of Washington. Believe it or not, there's a long story there about how that happened. Indiana, Florida, and then a form of it, kind of a watered down version, passed in Texas. And we're hoping in the next legislative session in Texas to do a better job of getting something passed there, because there's a great deal of concern in Texas. You know, what really touched off all this concern was when Hamas carried out the attack in Israel on in 2023, October 7th, 2023. There was a reaction here in the United States that was shocking to a lot of people. You saw thousands of people, thousands of Muslims taking to the streets to protest on behalf of Hamas, and waving Hamas flags, screaming, you know, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, all that kind of stuff. And people were shocked that there were, you know, this infrastructure of support for Hamas had built up. And that's a result of decades of infiltration by the Muslim Brotherhood here in the United States. Since the early 1960s, the Muslim Brotherhood has been operating here in the United States, and they've now got a large infrastructure And Hamas, of course, is a Muslim Brotherhood organization in Israel. And as a result of that, you saw a tremendous amount of really flat out rioting as well as demonstrations in support of Hamas here in the United States. People look at that and they're shocked. And then they look at what has happened in Western Europe over perhaps the last 25 or 30 years. And the problem with that is that they've allowed in a large Islamic population that is not fit into their society and has no desire to fit into their society. And it is changed European countries probably irreparably. Europe
Chris,
will
I think
never
we
be
have
the
Steve
same.
back. I think we have Steve back.
Right. So the problem is with Islamization in that you look in these European countries, they have Sharia courts operating in these European countries. And the host countries have allowed this to happen, really out of intimidation by these Muslim populations that have come in. The Muslim populations tend to be heavily male, and most of them are young. So you have a lot of military-age males who are very unhappy, and they've come to places like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Scandinavian countries, and we don't want to see that happen here in the United States. And one of the first things you need to do is make sure that they can't insinuate Sharia into our country. And so at this point, I understand Stephen Gele is with us, so I'll turn it over to him.
Hey guys, sorry I got called off on a call. Chris very well explicated. And by the way, excuse my garish clothing. We're in the middle of Mardi Gras here, so everyone wears purple, green, and gold, even though purple, green, and gold goes with absolutely nothing. Chris explicated very well what Sharia is and how it plays out both in society and why it's very different from what it's been characterized as in the media and often in political discussions. I mainly handle the issue of how it interplays with Louisiana law, and I'm not going to get too deep into the legal mumbo jumbo, but essentially, and this is a common criticism that, well, American states only apply American law. And that's true. American states only apply American law. So Idaho will only apply Idaho law. However, Idaho law, like every state, has provisions in its law that allows it to apply foreign law, particularly in 4 or 5 different contexts. One context is a foreign judgment. Every state will enforce, under certain circumstances, foreign judgments. So if someone gets a judgment, let's say for money, out of France for someone who, against someone who's in Idaho and has property in Idaho, they can take that judgment from France and try and enforce it in Idaho. And there's been rules on that. The name of the type of law is called comity, C-O-M-I-T. And over the years, there's been all kinds of statutes passed, including in Idaho, laying out those laws. One of the problems is that traditionally, both the common law and even worse now under certain statutes, to enforce that foreign judgment, let's say it's not from France, let's say it's from Pakistan or from Egypt or from Jordan, and they try and enforce that judgment in Idaho, there's no analysis traditionally as to whether, or under the modern statutes, as to whether or not that judgment was obtained in a way that would be constitutionally acceptable to Americans, particularly whether or not the judgment was obtained violating due process, violating equal protection, that is treating women and men equally, treating people of different religions equally, and whether or not that judgment was acquired under our same rules regarding free speech or freedom of religion, whether or not that court treated people of different religions equally. And what we found, and we have dozens and dozens of cases that show this, that people will take judgments from foreign countries. It's particularly common with custody orders, but it could be domestic law orders. It could even be money judgments. And they'll bring those judgments to the United States, to a court, for example, in Idaho, and try and enforce a custody judgment that a man in Pakistan got, basically where the father has all the rights and the mother has none. So we're trying to prevent that someone can't do something that would be completely unacceptable in the United States, in a foreign country, and then bring that judgment here. The other way that this manifests itself is what they call conflicts of law. Sometimes there's a debate over what jurisdiction's law should apply. So let's say you had a contract between someone in Idaho and someone in Saudi Arabia, or there was a business deal that went bad, or even there was, let's say, some kind of accident that occurred with something that was manufactured in Idaho, but it blew up in Pakistan. It was manufactured in Pakistan and it blew up in Idaho. The court would have to decide what jurisdiction's law it would apply, and the courts traditionally would not consider whether or not the law in the other country would violate our constitutional norms. Similarly, you have what they call choice of law, which is in contracts. So you might sign a contract that says, hey, if we get into a dispute, then the law of blank state or blank country would apply. These are very common within the United States. I regularly see contracts as a lawyer, someone in other states doing work for one of my clients in Louisiana, and they want the law of Alabama or Michigan or New York or somewhere else to apply. And I'll often object to that. I'm like, no, you're doing this work in Louisiana. I want the law of Louisiana to apply. And you can fight that out. These contracts aren't that exciting, obviously, if it's another state's law. Even if it's another country's law, if it's like a business deal among sophisticated people. But sometimes these contracts are not between necessarily sophisticated people. For example, there's Islamic marriage contracts called MARS, where a Muslim woman will sign a contract with the Muslim man, and before they get married, and in some states they treat them like prenuptial agreements, and they'll enforce them. And the contract says, okay, well, if we get into a marital dispute, if we're suing for divorce, we're fighting over child custody, we're fighting over child visitation, if we're fighting over splitting up property, then the law of Jordan will apply, or Egypt. Or sometimes it'll just say the law of Allah and his prophet Muhammad, which is Sharia. So, and these contracts have actually been enforced. For example, in Texas, there's actually been cases in other states where states have said, okay, we're going to follow that. And we're going to try and apply some foreign country's law or just general Sharia. The other new phenomenon that's developed, this is very prevalent in Texas, is that there's what they call an arbitration clause, where you have a right, and this is common in business, where you say, okay, if we get into a spat, we're not going to go to court. We're instead going to go before an arbitrator, and it's thought to be quicker and easier and cheaper. I'll tell you from experience, it's not always quicker, easier, and cheaper. I've had cases that I could have brought in front of a judge for almost, you don't pay the judge, the taxpayer does. I've had 3 lawyers acting as judge, and they're all billing me $1,000 an hour. And for hours and hours and hours. So it's not always cheaper, but sometimes people will get forced into arbitrations. One new phenomenon is they're trying to do that with marital contracts for Muslims. So the imam will be in the process of setting up a contract between a man and a woman to get married, called a mar. And the mar will say, if we get into a dispute, not only will the law of Allah apply, But also, not only will Sharia apply, but also we're not going to bring this to court. We're going to bring this before the Islamic Tribunal of Irving, Texas. And that'll be an imam or a Muslim lawyer. And it won't really look like a normal trial. They'll just sit down, they'll let the husband and wife talk, and they'll just make a decision based upon Islamic Sharia and tell them that's the law, and they'll try and enforce it as a judgment. Again, none of this would follow our normal due process. None of this follows equal protection. Women are not equal to men in these proceedings. Non-Muslims are not equal to Muslims in these proceedings. So for that reason, it kind of shocks the conscience of our constitutional norms. So the function of the other situation where this comes up is a doctrine called forum nonconvenience, where you claim, hey, I'm in court in Idaho, but I should really be somewhere else because it's more convenient to be somewhere else. That is, for some reason, I was able to sue someone in Idaho under Idaho's laws, but everything really happened somewhere else, and we should be somewhere else. And this happens often. Courts will defer to courts in other states. However, it's happened, let's say someone is injured at a resort, at a Marriott or a Sheraton in Saudi Arabia, and they realize, wow, I'm a Christian woman, and if I sue in Saudi Arabia, my testimony is worth 1/4 of a Muslim man's, and I may not want to try that case there, or the damages available to me are very little. So they'll find a way to sue, let's say Marriott in Delaware, where Marriott's chartered in the United States, and Marriott will say, no, we want to take this case to Saudi Arabia. And the courts are not currently instructed to do any sort of an analysis as to whether or not the court in Saudi Arabia will, apply basic constitutional rights, whether or not it will respect equal protection or freedom of religion. The other context this happens, particularly with foreign judgments, is with free speech. Other nations have very different libel laws than the United States does. In other nations, you have to prove you told the truth, whereas in the United States, the person suing you has to prove that you that you lied, that you intentionally lied. So the way those cases play out is very different. And one thing ALAC does, it will protect the people of Idaho from, let's say you say something on the internet and you insult someone in Pakistan, and they sue you in Pakistan. And of course, you don't fly to Pakistan to defend yourself. And they get a judgment out of Pakistan, and they show up in Idaho and they say, hey, I want your ranch because you said bad things about me, and this judge in Pakistan says you owe me $1 million. Again, currently there's no protections against that. ALAC would provide those protections. So the function of American laws for American courts is very practical. It's to prevent these very specific things from occurring that have occurred. We have dozens and dozens of cases across the United States where these things have occurred. It's in very specific legal context. This isn't theoretical. This is things that we know happen. Not only can happen under the law, but do happen. We have actual cases with actual people and actual judges fighting these battles. And the goal of ALAC is to prevent that from happening in the states where we've passed it. We've passed ALAC in different versions or different flavors in about 13 states. About 10 of them have our classic statute. 3 of them have kind of different variations. But if you pass ALAC, you will protect yourself from these 5 ways that foreign law, particularly Sharia, can make their way into Idaho. I'll also note that ALAC is facially neutral. That is, it doesn't mention anything about Sharia or Islam. It applies to all foreign law. So there are some types of foreign law other than Sharia that sometimes may offend our constitutional norms. There's, for example, Japanese custody judgments tend to be highly prejudicial towards the mother, highly prejudicial towards Japanese versus, for example, American military fathers. So there are other instances where other countries' laws, not just Islamic Sharia, may be found by a court to be prejudicial, particularly, for example, in the libel context. Most of the world does not have the same free speech protections that we do. So you can get a libel judgment that wouldn't be acceptable in the United States from Canada. And I myself have been threatened to have been sued in Canada over something that they could have then taken the Canadian judgment and tried to collect against me in Louisiana. Now, Louisiana has ALAC and other laws that protect against that. But that happens, and it's a real problem. And it does apply even beyond Islamic Sharia. So I think I gave the general gist. I don't know if there's anything in particular, Chris, you think that I missed. I'm happy to address it.
No, I think you did a fine job. The only thing I would add to that is the fact that there is no silver bullet when it comes to Sharia,
Right.
because there are so many aspects of Sharia. For instance, one of the things that's mandated under Sharia is female genital mutilation, which is euphemistically referred to as female circumcision. That is part of the Sunnah of Muhammad, and it is part of Sharia. And that has been outlawed in most states here in the United States. That's an example of something that is a Sharia doctrine that has been addressed. Most people don't even know that it was part of Sharia. There are many things like that. For instance, there's something called zakat in Sharia. Under zakat, Muslims can tithe to 8 different destinations. The 7th destination is literally those fighting in the way of Allah who are not on any army roster. And so that is what is known in the United States as material support for terrorism. So we have laws against providing material support for terrorism. That's another thing that's associated with Sharia. So there's no one law that's going to take care of all of Sharia. I have Sharia law textbooks here with me. They're 1,200 pages long. So remember, Sharia covers everything. It covers personal hygiene, and it covers the conditions under which an Islamic state would go to war. So American laws for American courts plays a vital role in that it keeps Sharia from insinuating itself and infiltrating our court system. We still have to remain vigilant on a lot of other fronts, especially in terms of our culture. And we've seen what happens when you're not vigilant in protecting your culture. We've seen that in Western Europe, and it's just tragic. At this point, I'd like to introduce retired Marine Colonel Paul Deckert, who is also an attorney, but he was an infantry officer in the Marine Corps and served several times in the Middle East, including in countries that were ruled by Sharia. And I'd like him to offer up his thoughts. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, I am on my cell phone, which is why I don't have the picture on, so you all don't get seasick. But I wanted to offer up to you all that if you're trying to vision what I look like, I want you to think of Thor. I'm about 6'8". I have flowing blonde hair, and just think of that. It's not true, but that's what I want you to think of. I want to start off with a couple of things. I'm going to hit 4 highlights for you all. 1, Quran versus Sharia. You'll hear a lot of people talk about, well, you know, I read the Quran and it's not so bad and it's got really nice things in it. Yeah, there's a lot of nice things you could take out of it, but it's like saying that you read the Psalms and now you understand the Bible because you read the Psalms. It is at best incomplete to say that you read the Quran so you understand Sharia, because as Chris and Stephen pointed out, it is one of the 3 legs that make up the stool of Sharia, and it is actually arguably the weakest, which will take us into my example. Many of you, if I say to you, how many times a day does a Muslim pray? And you'll say, well, everybody knows that's 5 times a day. Okay, That is true. A Muslim prays 5 times a day. How many times a day does it say to pray in the Quran? Let me give you a hint, not 5. The Quran says you're supposed to pray 3 times a day. But you see, in the life of Muhammad, Muhammad prayed 5 times a day. So now we have just gone into Sharia because that is application. It is not Quranical to pray 5 times a day. It is what Muhammad did, and therefore it is what you should do. And you're never going to find pray 5 times a day in the Quran. Therefore, the Quran is not the end all to beat all when it comes to this sort of stuff. There's an example for you. Next, Stephen touched on the idea of slander, also known as tail feathering in Islamic law. So, if I say something you don't like, I have slandered you under Sharia law. You don't like it. You say, you do not look like Thor, and I take offense to that, and I say that you have offended me. Therefore, you have slandered me. Now, in the United States, if you say, dude, you're like 5'9", you're not, you've got a flat top, you don't have long blonde hair, factually, you are correct. I don't look like Thor. So in the United States, you'd be fine because it's been proven that you spoke truthfully. But under Sharia, you would have slandered me. And why? Because I took offense to your statement. Nothing more than that. Which leads us into one of my favorite topics, and that's called the Red-Green Alliance. You've seen it unfold on the streets, where the socialists and the Islamists have come together for those wonderful protests, and you've all seen them. Chris alluded to some of them. You see some of them portray themselves where you've got Palestinian flags and anarchist flags and transgender flags, and everybody's against everything. There's a union that has taken place between those two groups in the Red-Green Alliance. You see it unfold in that literal sense, but you also see it unfold in the soft sense. And by the soft sense, I mean everybody here has watched television. You've watched different forms of television news. And you've seen over the last 20 years where newscasters will start to do things like, that is offensive, and you must retract it. Where is that under American law? If I speak the truth, then it's the truth. You may not like it, but it's still true. But you see, they're enforcing a Sharia application of, I don't like it, therefore you have slandered me. No, I have spoken the truth, and in this society, we can now discuss the truth. You may not like the truth. Jeffrey Epstein was a pervert and ran an island full of perverts. That's the truth. You visited Jeffrey's island. Please justify yourself. I take offense at you saying that. Well, I've got a flight manifest right here. Well, I don't care. I don't like it. Too bad. You did it. Therefore, I'm not slandering you. That's just an example of how the Red-Green Alliance, in its active state, you see it unfold on the streets. In its passive state, you see it unfold in outlets like the media. And the last piece I'd like to leave you all with, and I'm trying to be mindful of time because you all may have questions for us. The last piece I'd like to leave you with is the concept of leading. You're all either elected officials, community leaders, people who are dedicated enough to be at a presentation like this to try and learn more. Do continue to learn more, but lead. Leading is foreseeing the problem before it manifests itself in Minneapolis riots in Idaho. Leading is putting pieces in place so that you can be successful in preventing these things from happening, not responding after the fact. We have done this, the three of us, around the United States, as I think we told you before. And I remember Chris and I were doing this in Arkansas, and I'm going to leave the names out, but there was a governor there who came after me after we did a presentation and said that I had a solution in search of a problem. And they put me on a radio show in Little Rock that afternoon. And they asked me, they said, the governor says that your bill is a solution in search of a problem. And I said, I am surprised to know that the governor has just adopted the ACLU's talking point, because that's what the ACLU would say about us around the country. It is a solution in search of a problem. I said, I wonder if the governor would have thought to wear seatbelts before his granddaughter went through a windshield, or if he's going to wait till after the accident to decide that the child should be restrained in the vehicle. I wonder if the governor would have thought that we're not going to let people drink a half a fifth of Jack Daniels and go on a cross-country drive, or if he would have said, we're going to have alcohol limits to make sure that people don't hurt themselves. Are you going to do it after the problem, or are you going to forecast the problem based on reason, based on the evidence that's been put forth? Stephen laid out, there are cases all over the country on these sorts of things that happen. If it hasn't happened yet in Idaho, don't use hope as a course of action. Lead. And now I'll shut up and y'all can ask us questions.
First off, let's give them all a big hand for what they've done. I've learned quite a bit myself, and do we have any questions and whatnot? I know the one thing, and I'll just take it from what Colonel Deckert just said, and what he's saying is, and I've said this before, is Idaho. We love Idaho. We look at Idaho, and we're here, we're protected. You know what? We are not immune to what's going on, and that's the hardest thing for people to actually wake up and realize, is we are not immune. We love our state, we love our neighbors and all this. We are not immune, and we need to pay attention to those things. I do have a question. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but I read an article actually even today. I think it was the Attorney General in Texas was starting to take some action about I'll see if I can find it real quick, but what it was is because of a entity. Let me look. Apologize for this. Well, what it is actually came from the Attorney General launches a probe into a city that's going on in Texas, or something. It's in Texas. Hold on. The explosive report on Muslim-linked city plans, and there was and it came out today. It's on a website called the Daily Caller, and it starts out with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announced Monday that his office launched a formal investigation into a proposed massive sustainable city development in Kaufman County, Texas. And the probe centers on the allegations that a Dubai-linked project could be an unlawful attempt to establish a Sharia city in Texas.
I think we all three can address that.
Okay.
I'll go first. First of all, there's been a development in Texas, a real estate development that is in the planning stage still, it was originally called Epic, but then they changed it to the Meadow, and it is a development that is put together by two members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Texas. No question, two bad actors in Texas, but it's there's concerns that it could turn into something, and what you're describing is another concern. Texas, there's no question that Texas has been targeted by foreign organizations and foreign governments for a variety of reasons. Some of them obvious and some maybe not so obvious, but there's been a tremendous amount of Islamization, a tremendous amount of mosque expansion, and things like that. and there's an unbelievable amount of concern in Texas over Sharia and those things like that now. I spent a lot of time in 2025 in Texas, and I'm sure that I'm going to be spending most of 2027 in Texas as a result of these concerns. Ken Paxton is their attorney general, but you also have to realize that he's running for the U.S. Senate. So a lot of these, this is the third investigation that he has announced that he is conducting. He originally was announced that he was conducting an investigation into Epic, and then he said he was doing an investigation into the Muslim Brotherhood and the Council on American Islamic Relations. And then the governor kind of one-upped them on that by designating them as terrorist organizations. And then now there's this investigation. It's a huge issue in Texas, and I hate to be cynical, but I think a lot of this is because he's running for the U.S. Senate, and his campaign is frankly in trouble.
Yes, thanks for taking our questions. You mentioned bad actors, and I was wondering, should a mosque be developed in your community? How would you know if they're, quote, bad actors, if they're just nice people practicing their religion? How do you know how involved they are in Sharia? Thank you.
There are ways of telling. They involve investigations, things like that, that can be conducted to determine the level of Sharia compliance. It's not something that I would recommend that a private citizen do, but there are ways of telling, including, for instance, one way to identify a questionable mosque would be to find out if it has been financed by the North American Islamic Trust, NAIT, N-A-I-T. That's the banker to the Muslim Brotherhood. Depending on whose numbers you used, according to testimony before the U.S. Congress, anywhere between 1 in 5 and 4 in 5 of all the mosques in the United States are either financed by or owned outright by the North American Islamic Trust. North American Islamic Trust is almost fully funded from overseas, primarily from Qatar, and they were named an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terrorism financing trial in U.S. history, the U.S. versus the Holy Land Foundation, in which the largest Muslim charity in the United States, the Holy Land Foundation, was prosecuted for sending $12 million to Hamas. And the officers were prosecuted, they were convicted on all counts, and the Holy Land Foundation was shut down. There were numerous unindicted co-conspirators in that trial, including the North American Islamic Trust. And it happened in Texas. It was the intention of the Dallas U.S. Attorney's Office to prosecute the unindicted co-conspirators one by one, as their resources would allow. But then Barack Obama got elected president, and Eric Holder became attorney general, and he shut down that investigation, and that's why none of the unindicted co-conspirators were prosecuted. But there are ways of telling, but it's not something that the average person is going to be able to do.
I'm going to jump in on that, and I'm going to give you a couple of little things to remember. Now, Chris is right. You know, a true investigation is what's required to determine whether or not these people are bad actors or not. But I'm going to point out a couple of things to you that you should be aware of. One, The people who normally end up being bad actors are the most orthodox practitioners of Sharia. The most orthodox practitioners of Sharia are the ones who have certain traits you can identify. If they are a male and they're wearing gold jewelry, they are not an orthodox practitioner of Sharia, because men can only wear silver. If they are an orthodox practitioner, they will not be working at a store that sells lottery tickets or alcohol, because they can't. So if you say somebody's a nice guy, I always go here, I get gas at this gas station, he's really nice, okay. He may wear Western clothes, but if he's got silver jewelry, he's got a beard with no mustache, they don't sell lottery tickets, everybody else does, they don't sell alcohol, everybody else does, that would be an indicator. And the same sort of thing when you look at the folks that go to the mosque. The most orthodox practitioners are the ones who are the most Sharia compliant. We have a tendency in this country to say good Muslim, bad Muslim, by whether or not somebody is nice. It's actually the exact opposite. If they are a good Muslim, they are fully Sharia compliant. They are practicing their faith via orthodoxy. If they are not practicing their faith via orthodoxy, then according to Islam, they are a bad Muslim. And they become subject to the ire of the good Muslim, much more than you do, because they should know better. And that is the sort of thing that you end up looking for as an individual on where you choose to associate your personage, not so much for legal action, like Chris said, that requires true investigation that is beyond the scope of any individual citizen. But as an individual, be aware that those are indicators of somebody who is a true believer, orthodox in their faith. And their faith is Sharia and all that applies. And I hope that clarifies and answers the question.
Yes, it did. Very good. Thank you very much. We have another question now.
I have a question. I don't see it happening in Idaho, but I think it's a city in Michigan that the Muslims have taken over it. The mayor blasts music all starting early in the morning at the different times, 5 times that they have to pray. A citizen showed up at the city council and complained about it, to which the mayor said, "Get the hell out of my city. I don't want you here. We're playing the music and it's for the prayers and that's all there is to it." So what can those people do to help stop that?
That's a quandary. First of all, that mayor was just unbelievable. That response, you'd almost never see that from an elected official. The way he responded to that person, just completely without respect for a constituent. But in terms of the call to prayer, which is what they do at mosques, they view that the same way that you and I would view church bells, and that's been challenged in court. And I'll let Stephen comment on that. But that's going to be a tough one to win, because if you silence the call to prayer, you're going to silence the church bells too, more than likely. Stephen?
Yeah, I would add that that regulations on things like sound, music, different aesthetics have to be facially neutral. So you can't limit Islamic calls to prayer and not similarly limit Christian church bells. That said, most Christian churches don't have obnoxiously loud church bells at 5 a.m. So you can come up with neutral requirements regarding sound volumes and times a day and things like that. And most likely those would be able to be passed and handled. But those need to be handled situationally. The only other thing I would say about generally about, the nice Muslim versus the not nice Muslim, you need laws anyway. Like, we're not saying that all Muslims are trying to enforce Sharia on everyone. They're not. But there are some that are. And therefore we need laws like American laws for American courts to discourage them. First of all, keep the injustices, particular injustices, from occurring. And second of all, to discourage them from wanting to be here. Because if you're someone who wants to be able to live under a Sharia law regime, and if our laws don't allow you to live under a Sharia law regime, then you're less likely to want to come here. So the best way to discourage Muslims who want to live in a Sharia compliant society is prevent them from being able to enforce that. And the best way to do that is through law. So again, laws like American laws for American courts can affect that. The only other thing I will note is that, and I'm looking quickly to see if I have any Idaho cases, but there are cases in the states around you that I've found quickly. And it is not, everyone thinks it's not going to happen where they are. But it does. There's almost no corner of the country that this hasn't touched in some way, including Louisiana. There's cases out of Louisiana where people have tried to enforce foreign judgments. We had our own terrorist attack 2 New Years ago. It was someone from Texas, but they came here. So there's no hiding from this. Either states can pass laws that will protect them and will inhibit this, or they won't. And the problems will find their ways to the places that are most vulnerable. And the key is to make you not the most vulnerable.
Yeah, I agree with what the guys have said. Simply to your point, noise ordinances are the first thing that you'd think of. The distance by which something can be broadcast, times of day, or another one. And I think that's the legal way that you'd go about curtailing it. You can't necessarily prohibit it if they decide to go that way, but you can curtail it because they're not allowed to inflict that upon the rest of society. You have to be within reason. So the first thing would be noise ordinances and limit the time of day. Just a personal point of view, I know there's the famous quote from Barack Obama that he thought that nothing was better than the call to prayer. Having spent several years in the Middle East, personally, to me, it sounds like cats being fed into a food processor. I don't want to hear it at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's so damn hot over there. It's the only time you can get any sleep. So I appreciate people who don't want to hear it, but we are a country of laws, not just prevailing opinions, and therefore we have to approach these things from a position of law. And in order for me to do what I want, I have to do it in a legal way, and so do you, whoever you may be. So we have to remember that.
Thank you. We have another, this gentleman first.
Thank you. My question is, because Americans are really very gullible, and we always want to see the best in everyone. I think that's how we get duped into a lot of things, just because we want to see the best, even though it's the worst. The European model that you spoke of, I kind of followed that a little bit, as much as I can through the media. And the parliament over there has got these people in their parliament. France, I know, was trying to kick some of them out of France because it was getting so bad. How are they going to turn it around? That's one question. The second question is, I expected to see a much bigger turnout when I heard about this in Idaho here. It's kind of like Danger Will Robinson, and I thought, this is cool. You're making this people aware of what's really going on and what could go on. So it's hard to have sometimes political discussions with neighbors and friends because they just don't want to get into that, want to be left alone. So what's your suggestion for getting other people aware, like we became aware of so many things tonight that we didn't know of. But what's your suggestion for us to get other people we know to become more aware of what's going on?
Okay, first of all, you know, on the issue of what's going on in Europe, you're absolutely right in terms of the Islamization of Europe. I don't think that they can turn it around. I've talked to people who've spent a lot of time in Europe, and their response when I ask that question of them is it will take massive deportations. And the Europeans just don't have the guts to do it. And without that, you look at the demographics, and the Muslims are going to take over simply by their birth rate. It's you know it's inevitable. The Europeans are not having babies, and the Muslim immigrants, both legal and illegal, are having babies at a very rapid rate. And you know, Mark Stein wrote a great book probably 10 years ago now called America Alone that discusses this 10 years ago. And he predicted all of this. He said, you know, France is not going to be French anymore. Germany is not going to be German anymore, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I don't see them turning that around. You can't all of a sudden get Europeans to have babies at a rapid enough clip to overcome what has happened. And the Muslims that have come there are not going to stop having babies. You can find videos online of imams and Islamic scholars bragging about the fact that they're going to take over Europe because of the birth rate. They are very aware that this advantage exists for them, and so I don't think that it's possible. I think Europe is lost. It pains me to say that. I just don't think that there's any alternative to that. Now, in terms of getting other people to understand this threat and understand that that it's a problem. I would recommend to you a book that is published by the Center for the Study of Political Islam. Really very admirable gentleman named Dr. Bill Warner, PhD. He was actually a physicist, and he retired from teaching college and started to study Islam after 9/11 and used the scientific method to study it. And he wrote a book called Sharia Law for Non-Muslims. And it's not particularly long. I think it's 40 some odd pages. I could be wrong. I can't remember. But you can buy it from the Center for the Study of Political Islam's Amazon page, as well as probably on their website. Bill Warner is the author. And that's a good primer for people who need to understand what Sharia is and why it threatens us. And I'll let
the name of
the
that
other
book
two.
again, Christopher? What was the name of that book again?
Sharia Law for Non-Muslims.
The one thing that I
Okay,
would add
actually,
is that, I'm sorry. The one thing that I would add is that, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Steve just had some actual numbers, I think, on birth rates and stuff, and he wanted to share with us. So,
in order to sustain a population, you need a birth rate of about 2.1%. Europe is about 1.2% right now. United States of America is about 1.9. The Muslims are reproducing at a rate of about 5%. Okay, think about that. The city of Marseille, France, the second most populous city in France, has over 200,000 Muslims living in the city, reproducing at a rate of 5%. That's why the numbers that they're talking about, it's almost impossible for Europe to survive.
Well, I mean, shoot, the mayor of London is a Muslim, and there's talk that Starmer is going to be out as the prime minister, and the heir apparent, evidently to be prime minister of the UK, could very well be a Muslim.
So Stephen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, my comment, I find, and we kind of stumbled upon this, that the best way to explain any phenomena is through example. Like generally, people react well to storytelling. So, you know, if you're trying to explain why people need American laws for American courts, you can use examples of cases that have occurred. Like, hey, some woman, married a Muslim guy. He got a judgment for the kids out of Pakistan and came to the United States and took the kids away. Or someone, said something on the internet and got sued in a foreign country, and now they're trying to take their house here. Those kind of very practical, everyday things that people could somehow imagine happening, not so necessarily always to them, but it could be to them, but also imagine happening to their friends, family, neighborhoods, people, in the same town. That tends to make things come home, as opposed to telling, and if it wasn't coming home, we wouldn't be interested in it, as opposed to telling someone, okay, well, this phenomena is happening very theoretically. And it's a more, I'm not saying that analysis is bad and we shouldn't say that, but I find that most people tend to, glaze over and don't, that doesn't really hit home for them. It doesn't really persuade them. They think, well, that'll never come here. So I think that it's important to be able to give them concrete examples of ways that this can happen in a way that's understandable. And we're trying to address in American laws for American courts is really specific, very exact ways that this not only can happen, but has happened. And it's not, something very general, like we're going to ban Sharia. We're addressing very specific problems that we know exist. I think that's the best way to kind of to make people care.
I'm going to jump in real quick. If the moderator will let me, there's a couple of things, 3 things real quick. So one, your last point first, what can people do? One, you're doing it. Your education, your expansion on the topic, your fluency in the topic, then puts you in a position to lead others because you have gained knowledge on the topic. Things like the book that Chris pointed out, and if anybody forgot to write it down, they keep reminding us that this is being taped. So go back to the tape and look at it. Take the opportunity to see if you can get a group of people that are willing to look at the tape of what we're doing, but educate people. That's you leading, that's you addressing the topic, that's you addressing the problem by expanding the knowledge base as people become more and more willing. You can't force them, but if somebody's willing, give them the tools. Exercise the tools yourself, and then expand the tools to your fellows as you come across them in your community. When it comes to Europe, I'll tell you 2 things. One, 2009, I had a joint task force in Morocco. I had to come back, travel through France as part of that. When I got to France in early 2009, the big deal was France had, at long last, joined the rest of the European Union and had a second official language. The second official language of France since 2009 is English. Why did they wait so long? Because they're French. and they hate English intrusion, and they've had prime ministers who established boards to create new words because they didn't like English words creeping into French. But they decided to go ahead and adopt English. And I was asking one of the French officers, why'd they do that? And he said, because if we didn't, it was going to be Arabic by default. Their problem is of their creation. Germany's got a similar problem. Germany's self-loathing after World War II has gotten to the point where they're all manic. And they're afraid to be proud to be German because they're afraid of what happened in the 30s. That's on them. Don't be afraid to be an American. Don't be afraid to be yourself. That's part of it too. You don't need to be mean to be proud to be an American. You don't need to be mean and stop somebody from doing good things while protecting those rights that are yours. If somebody wants to come here and be an American and do things similar to what they did back home, well, that's fine. Do them within your confines, but you're not going to bring the stuff from there and try and make it the same here. We're not going to do it. We're going to stand there. This is the rock upon which you're going to die. We're not going to yield. So implanting your spine in others will help. Now I'll be quiet.
Well, I'll give you a big hand on that one because I agree 100% with everything. This is America. We're all for immigration. We're all to support this, but you know what? This is America. If you like your country so much and the culture, why are you leaving it? If you want to come here, we are America, and we have our rules and our laws, and we are who we are. And for 250 years, we fought for things like this. So we are Americans, and we need to, like we did 250 years ago, almost, but a little different. But we need to fight for America. We have another question.
So my question is a little bit about the Muslim principles that they live by. And you touched a little bit on it, saying that one of their goals is to make the whole world under Muslim law or all Muslim. But my main exposure to Muslims have been recently the experiences in Minnesota. And the Nick Shirley boy who did those interviews, his grandpa lives in Rexburg, so I know Henry Shirley. And that young man has done a lot to expose that apparently Muslims don't believe in working. They kind of just believe in being pirates and stealing. Is there some truth to that? Do Muslims actually have a work ethic? Because you hear about what's going on in Yemen, and they're all pirates down there too. And so I kind of wonder, and I thought maybe you'd touch a little more on, what are their morals and principles? Because Christians, they teach you to love your neighbor and treat your neighbor the way you'd like to be treated. Is there kind of a motto that the Muslims live by? Is it cheat and steal?
No, it's not fair to paint those actions as Islamic actions. Those are cultural to the Somalis, and often you'll see in Islamic practice cultural issues get wrapped into Sharia, and that's one of the things that they're scholars. And I'm trying to give the best light possible here, and Chris and Stephen can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to give them the best light possible. They try and keep it to Sharia and not the cultural aspects. The cultural aspects across much of the Islamic world have some similarities, but there are also very specific ones. And the culture of Somalia, though they practice Islam, a lot of their culture is not Islamic. The theft and those sorts of things. Now, there's ways that they can skew that, but that is a cultural issue. Those practices would not necessarily be acceptable in, say, Jordan, which is also an Islamic kingdom. Those practices would not be acceptable in parts of Armenia, which is also Islamic. So it's not the Islamic piece. A lot of what you're seeing is a cultural piece based on people from a specific area and them bringing their cultural baggage, because again, they are refusing to become Americans. They're trying to reestablish the old country in this country.
I agree with that with regard to the Somali population. There are issues unique to Somalis that, I mean, nobody thinks it's a good idea to bring large numbers of Somalis into their country. Only the United States would do that. Now, there is one thing about what the gentleman asked that I would point out. There is no golden rule in Islam. The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That does not exist in Islam. Again, I'm going to bring up Bill Warner, the Center for the Study of Political Islam. He talks about that as a key difference between Islam and the Western world. The lack of a golden rule.
Okay, another question.
Comment and comment in a minute. So earlier we were talking about the demographics. I saw a chart here just in the last week. In 2000, there were approximately 500,000 Muslims in Europe. They're now approaching just shy of 50 million in that 26-year period. All of the countries in Europe, if you go look up the statistical data, ask what the baby's first name, most common name is, it's Muhammad. It's happening. Okay, it's happening. Now my question. So this is probably what's for all of you, but probably more so for the Colonel. Colonel, in World War II, when the Germans and everybody was fighting, and we were able to get a hold of an Enigma machine, us and the Brits, we were able to take that and did all this work, and we were able to just fine tune and get little pieces of data so that we could have part of the enemy's plan. And it was so valuable, and we were fighting a war and all that. So if you take that same example, rush forward on it, and you talk about the Holy Land Foundation, and we talk about the Brotherhood Explanatory Memorandum, all of this stuff is listed out in pages and pages and pages. And it's not little pieces of a battle plan. It's the entire master battle plan of what they're doing and how they're going to do it and when they're going to do it. It's got all the acronyms for all the people. My question specifically is, do our legislators really understand this? They need that. It's there. We have the evidence. Why can't we get it to them and make them understand it? It's so clear. It's just so clear. It just doesn't make sense to me.
The overwhelming majority of legislators are not aware of things like the explanatory memorandum that the gentleman referred to. The explanatory memorandum was written in the early 1990s, and it was entered into evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial that I mentioned earlier, the largest terrorism financing prosecution in U.S. history. And that was basically the operation order for the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. I'm going to paraphrase the key thesis statement of that memorandum, which is 18 pages long. But basically what it says is that the purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States is to tear down our miserable house by our hands, as well as the hands of the Muslims, to replace it with Allah's law. That's what their goal is in the United States. And they lay out a plan to do that. And then they list their friends and allies and affiliates in the United States on the last page of that memorandum. And every major Muslim organization in the United States is listed in that memorandum as a Muslim Brotherhood organization. And I guess I should say the Muslim Brotherhood is the forerunner of every jihadist group in the world. They founded Hamas, and they have the same goal that every jihadist organization has, to establish an Islamic State ruled by Sharia. That is the purpose of the Muslim Brotherhood since its founding in 1928 in Alexandria, Egypt. So there's so many aspects to this. No question about it. I mean, we could hold this seminar for a week and not cover everything that needs to be covered to really do a deep dive into all aspects of this.
I'm gonna jump in there and be a little bit more blunt because Chris has a much more learned approach to answering your question. I'm going to answer your question a little bit more bar roomy. Your leaders are weak and they're ignorant. I'm not going to say they're stupid, but I am going to say they're weak and they're ignorant. Your job is to, once again, help them find their spine. Now, we are blessed with an ocean of greedy, weak leaders who are more concerned about getting money than accomplishing the mission or the task at hand. And they have sold you out for the last 80 years. This is one of the vehicles by which they sold you out. As is revealed in the documents that have been listed and the approaches, the other side knows it. They know that these guys are buyable and they will shut up and play ball. Hell, they'll even advocate for their own demise if the dollar amount's big enough because they're weak and we allow them to be weak. We don't hold them accountable. We don't confront them legally, professionally, and challenge them on their weakness. But they're weak. And there are way too many of our fellow Americans who are sheep. Now, I know y'all know what sheep are out there in Idaho. It's a grazing animal. And when it grazes, its head is down and it's eating grass and it's happy. And it has to have a shepherd or sheepdogs that watch because it's so busy being happy with its head down, eating grass, it doesn't know what's happening until a threat approaches. Somebody on the perimeter gets hit, everybody picks their head up, gets scared, runs away a little bit, goes back to grazing, hoping that they're not next. Most people are like that. How can you identify them? Gentleman earlier mentioned he has trouble getting people to pay attention on these topics. Those people are going to self-identify as sheep. This is how they do it. You, as a sheepdog, are saying there is a threat out there. And whenever the people respond to you the way I'm about to tell you, I want you to think of a head down sheep going crunch, crunch, crunch on the grass. Because this is what they're going to tell you. Man, I'm too busy for that. I don't have time for politics. That stuff doesn't affect me. That's not going on in my neighborhood. I got enough stuff going on. My wife's a pain in the behind. I got kids that are screw-ups. I got a boss at work that's giving me a hard time. They are selfish, they're head down, and they're munching grass. And you're trying to save their life, literally. We did earlier this evening examples of dying societies across the Atlantic Ocean, and we can all see it. And the numbers don't lie. You can't outdo math. And we're trying to stop it here. So be that sheepdog, be head up, bark if you have to, but try and get the damn sheep to stop eating grass and pay attention. Otherwise, the herd's not going to move until somebody gets eaten. And I hope it doesn't happen in Idaho. I hope that answers your question.
Here, yeah. Well, and that I'll just say that that's one thing the Stand Up for Idaho is trying to do is bring awareness to these things, on a variety of topics. So thank you very, very much. I do have a question for you, Christopher. You mentioned this memorandum and whatnot. Is that available?
Yes. I'm going to go on Amazon right now. We published it at the Center for Security Policy, and I want to see if it's available on
Is it at all possible to?
Yeah, you can buy it on Amazon for $5.32. You can buy the memorandum.
So I get frowned upon if I bought it and reprinted it and stuck it out on the internet, right?
You can probably find a PDF of it on the internet. It's just enter into a search engine an explanatory memorandum, and it'll probably come up.
Okay, I'll actually get with you after this and whatnot, and I'll see if I can find a PDF that's out there that we can get, and we'll do that, and I'll actually put it out on our site, and I'll publish it, and it's something that we need to know. Okay, and I think this is part of we need to start providing evidence, to people, and we can say, yeah, you can be the sheep, you don't want to know, and all that. Well, here are the facts, so we can try to do that. Steve, you had a comment? Come up here. Wait.
Another good document to look at is the bylaws of the Muslim Brotherhood. It spells it all out right there, what they want to do.
I just found a PDF of the explanatory memorandum. The Investigative Project on Terrorism, which is at investigativeproject.org, is a excellent organization, and they have a PDF of the explanatory memorandum. And the full title is an explanatory memorandum for the general strategic goal of the group in North America. But if you go to the investigative project,
if you could maybe, Christopher, if you could maybe just send me a link to that.
Yeah,
that would be wonderful. Just send it to my email. You have my email. That would be wonderful for us. So,
all right, I'll get that right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Another question? Come on up.
Now this version is both in English and Arabic. So when you scroll through,
well,
just another comment. It made me think of something with when you're talking about these different countries, and like the Chinese now are sending people over here to have babies so that they can become instant citizens, and they'll be voters, and they're exponentially, coming into our society. And there's other countries doing this to us too. So for the Muslims, it's not necessarily unique, but it made me think of what a guy told me one time about, if you want to get a business going, don't start it. Go buy one that's running. And that's kind of what they're doing. It's all the structures here, just infiltrate it and take it. And you don't have to do any more of the hard work.
Okay, I have a lady that is a little camera shy, so she has a question.
So one of the problems I see that's common with Sharia law is that they allow their men to marry 3 women, and they can have as many wives as their hand holds. In England, the Muslims are having 3 wives at least, and each of them are having 5, 6, 8 children each, and they're all on public welfare. Do you know what's happening in our country about that? Because we have anti-polygamy laws, and they're not enforced. And so what would stop the Muslims from doing the same thing and getting on public welfare and further putting us in debt and of course overproducing us? Because right now the only people that are having babies, really having babies, are Mormons, Amish, and Muslims, and a few Catholics. So we're looking forward to seeing other people have lots of babies. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And that is happening in America too. And my evidence for that is anecdotal, but I'll explain what I mean. Back at the very tail end of Michael Bloomberg's administration as the mayor of New York, there was a horrendous apartment fire in New York City. And there were fatalities and injuries, and it was a really bad scene. And Mayor Bloomberg went to the scene, and the media was interviewing some of the residents of the apartment complex as well as the surrounding structures. And they interviewed a man who was obviously Middle Eastern, and he informed the reporter that one of his wives had been injured in the fire. And I mean to tell you, the reporter didn't bat an eye, and back in the newsroom, the anchor didn't bat an eye. Just one of that man's wives was injured in the fire. Well, we sure hope she's going to be okay, and of course we hope that she's going to be okay. But do you think that's the only case in the United States of a polygamous Muslim marriage? I can assure you that polygamy is not a Mormon issue in this country. It is a Muslim issue, and it is happening for sure. And there is a welfare aspect to it, as the lady mentioned. You used to have something called aid to families with dependent children. So when you can have that many children and collect more money depending on how many children that you have, because you have essentially concubines living with you, it can get really out of hand. And that is what has happened in Western Europe for sure.
You had the reporter who was uncovering things with the Somalis, and they've done some statistical analysis that when the Somalis come over, it's over 85% of them are on public assistance. And after being in this country for more than 15 years, 72% are still on public assistance. Now, there's a reason for that, none the least of which is they can't acknowledge their additional wives, though they have them, and they come on the books as unwed mothers, and they are getting public assistance from that. Now, the one thing the lady said, she was mostly right, not trying to harsh her. It's 4 wives. You have 4 wives at any given point in time, but you can always divorce them and trade them in for a younger model. And that's the way they keep 4 on deck at any given time. And should the lady get advanced in years, depending on how randy the husband is, he might get rid of her to get another one so he can have even more children. And that's 4 on deck. Now, the concubine piece, again, stated in Sharia, is, and as many concubines as you can control with your right arm. Now, how do we see that in practice? That's the grooming gangs you've heard about in England. That's the attacks at swimming pools and that sort of thing in Germany. Those are the rape cases that you hear about, because they view those women who are non-Sharia compliant as, to use the old term, women of the town. And as such, they are subject to concubinage, which in their terms means you could feel free to rape them because they are women of the town and it doesn't matter. It's not against their law. The law does not apply to these women. And as such, your actions are not criminal under their rules and their interpretation. And you need to remember that. God forbid you should start seeing grooming gangs in Idaho of 16 to 22-year-old men that are out there on the make as a group and start doing gang rapes. They're seeing it in England. They covered it up for a while. They're starting to not cover it up anymore. Ireland's in damn near open revolt over it. So some people have had enough. But is it too late? That's the question. Let us not be too late.
Thank you. Rusty, come on up.
We haven't talked about it tonight, but we all know about it, and they're called no-go zones over in the UK, and they like that. They understand it. They got an area they control. I really think we should have no-go zones, and I think you guys ought to lead this charge with these laws you're trying to change. We need some no-go zones for Sharia law of our own. So I'm all for that.
Those areas started in Sweden, and then they have them in France too, and they're called. I don't speak French, but it's something like sensitive social zones, or some euphemism for what they are. And the media doesn't like the term no-go zone, because technically it's not that you're not allowed there. It's just that these are Muslim enclaves. They're ghettos essentially, and you're not really welcome there. Let me tell you, I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota in 2011. That's what, 15 years ago. And I was in a part of town where all of the signs on the storefronts were in Arabic, and the men were dressed in thobes, and the women were dressed either in hijabs or burqas. And I was dressed in a business suit, and they were looking at me like, "What the hell are you doing here?" Um, so uh, there are areas in the United States that border on that now, and we're heading in the wrong direction if we don't do something about this culturally. That's what I mean by this. We can protect our law, and that's great, and and we can put more laws on the books, but culturally we have to protect what it means to be American. And what Europe did is they forgot who they were. And the first thing we have to understand is we have a unique constitution, and that is the bulwark against everything for U.S. citizens, our Constitution. That's why American Laws for American Courts is so successful. And it's because we geared the law toward protecting our fundamental constitutional rights, not against banning anything else. And it reminds us of who we are. We best never forget who we are, because that happened in Europe, and we've seen the result of that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yep. Another one coming up.
I don't know if you've answered this previously, but are there states that have passed laws to ban Sharia law within their state?
Yeah, there's about 13 states that have passed American Laws for American Courts, 10 using our model language, and a few others that have used a form of it.
And what are the two most important things we can do to get a similar law passed in Idaho?
Well, you're doing it right now by being a part of this organization and organizing, and then make sure that you let your state representatives and state senators know that you support that legislation. And I believe this is very important. You should write handwritten letters and mail them to legislators. Don't just send in emails. Don't just call and leave a message on the phone, because that doesn't take as much effort. And it's almost disregarded when they start getting email after email after email supporting a piece of legislation. They even become cynical about it. And it can even get to be a burden where they get in so many emails that it just clogs up their system. On the other hand, if they get a handwritten letter from somebody in their own words supporting a piece of legislation, and by the way, I'm a voter in your district, that means something to the legislators. So use the old-fashioned method of snail mail in this case. I'm not a big fan of the U.S. Postal Service, but in this case, I think it's a good method to get the attention of our elected officials.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
If anybody's interested, I do have the bill number that's going through Congress right now. It is RS 32880C1, and it's called the Constitutional Courts Act.
And that one I think is going through the House right
That's
now.
in the House right now.
The Idaho House.
It's RS 32880C1, the Constitutional Courts Act. And it'll add a new section to Idaho Code, which would be 1-1626.
One dash 1626. Any other questions? You know, one other thing you can do, I know it's a little bit of travel, but you can go and show up at their office. You know, go to Boise. It's not a bad drive, and especially, you know, right now the weather's not too bad. Well, I guess it might be snowing today, but you know, show up in their office. Go see them at the legislature and say, hey, you know, this is important. And I'd say that with this bill and any bill that is important to you, go show up. It means you can write letters all day long and hope they get there. You can write emails and hope they get read. You can do a lot of stuff, but you can show up there and talk to them. You can go testify, you know, testify in committee about things. Step up there and show up to say, hey, this is what we need. This is what we want, and this is why. It's like it was said, it's too easy to ignore the emails and the phone calls that are left on and those type things. But when you show up, they have to pay attention. So, any other questions? Anybody? And you know, I just want to say this. This is a little bit of a worriment and whatnot, but this is happening in Idaho. There are mosques being built all across the state. We have one in Idaho Falls, and so, you know, we have to pay attention. And not saying that things are bad, and like Christopher, that the people are, but we have to pay attention. Things have happened across the nation. Idaho, I would say, is being invaded, okay, from out-of-staters, okay, and they're coming in for one of two reasons: to get out of where they were, if you're talking California, Washington, Oregon, like that, or they're coming in to change us, okay? And for us to think that we're immune, that's not going to happen here, that, oh, we're fine. We're those, if we do that, we're those sheep that the colonel was talking about. And we need to speak up. We need to do things. We need to do what we can to let everybody know, and let your neighbors know, let your legislators. They're going to look at you like you're crazy, and they're going to say, I don't want to hear it. And someday, and just tell them, you know, I hope that someday I don't have to say I told you so. And whatnot. So you have to be diligent in doing this and stand up for Idaho. This is what we do. We're trying to get people, trying to expose just reality. I'm not making anything up here. This isn't being made up by anybody. This is happening right now in our beloved country. And we can't ignore it. And so we must do something about it. And with that, let's give those guys a big hand. You know, Christopher and Stephen and Colonel Deckert, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
thank you all. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well, and we may have you back again and whatnot. And I'd like us all to give Steve Hyatt a big hand too for actually bringing this here and making us aware of all that. And so, Steve, thank you all so much. Okay, so I'm going to get a hold of these. You know, I'll get that PDF and I'll get some of these things up, and I'll try to get them out so that we can all see them. One other quick thing is, I'm working on it, is you know about the grocery tax repeal initiative that's going on. It's going to take us a petition signing. We got to get it on the ballot. There's a lady back here that actually has a petition. If you're for repealing the grocery tax and you haven't signed a petition, see her and sign the petition, because that's what it's going to take. And with that, folks, come next week and listen and learn about the new microreactors that they're hoping to build in Idaho Falls. But then the following week, an Article 5 convention. It's very important. And on that note, tomorrow, call your senator. Find out who he or she is. Call them. Leave a voicemail. It's hard to do, but tell them to vote no on that Article 5. So with that, folks, thank you so much, everybody. Christopher, Stephen, Paul, thank you so much, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much. Take care, okay?
God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you all.